Some nights, you save a life. Other nights, you destroy your own. Alina Marek didn't know which she'd done when the bleeding man in the designer suit sat down in her ER bay at 2 a.m. His guards wore tactical earpieces. His eyes held winter. His wound told stories his mouth refused to speak. She stitched him with steady hands and a racing heart. He left cash she wouldn't take and a warning she didn't understand. Stay quiet. 24 hours later, her street was a fortress. His men, his cars, his world, all surrounding the crumbling building where she lived alone. The Mafia boss she'd bandaged had returned. And this time, he wasn't bleeding. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comment section where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. The night shift at Mercy General always smelled the same: antiseptic layered over blood, burnt coffee, and the particular desperation that gathered in hospital corridors after midnight. Alina Marek had grown accustomed to it over her 3 years as a trauma nurse, the way suffering had its own scent. The way fear tasted metallic on the back of your tongue, even when you weren't the one bleeding. But tonight, the smell of copper was stronger. Rain hammered against the reinforced windows, turning the outside world into a blur of neon and shadow. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast everything in that particular shade of exhaustion white that made even healthy people look half dead. Alina's shoulders ached from the double shift. 12 hours had stretched into 16, and her body felt like it was held together by caffeine and spite. "Marek, you're up. Bay 4. Dr. Patel slid a chart across the nurse's station without looking up from his phone. She glanced at the sparse notes. Male, laceration, possible knife wound, patient refusing doctor. Refusing? Alina frowned. Patel shrugged. Just clean him up and get him out. We're backed up. The curtain around Bay 4 was drawn tight, unusual in their overcrowded ER where privacy was a luxury they rarely afforded. Alina knocked twice on the metal frame. Mr. She checked the chart. No name, just a dash where the registration should be. I'm Alina, your nurse tonight. May I come in? Silence. She pushed the curtain aside and stopped breathing. 3 men occupied the small space. 2 stood on either side of the gurney like sentinels. Black suits, black ties, earpieces coiled at their collars, hands clasped in front of them with military precision. Their eyes tracked her movement with predatory focus. But it was the third man who made her heart stumble. He sat on the edge of the bed, spine straight despite the blood blooming through an expensive white shirt. His suit jacket lay folded beside him, perfectly creased, unmarred by whatever violence had torn into his flesh. Dark hair swept back from a face all angles and shadows. High cheekbones, strong jaw, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, and meant it even less. His eyes lifted to hers. Gray. Not warm gray or soft gray, but the color of winter ice over deep water, the kind of cold that burned. I asked for a doctor. His accent curled around the words, Italian maybe, or something Eastern European. Smooth as aged whiskey with gravel underneath. Alina forced herself to step fully into the bay, letting the curtain fall closed behind her. Professional, competent, unafraid. I understand, but I'm qualified to treat lacerations. I've been doing this for 3 years. One dark eyebrow arched. 3 years. He said it like he was calculating whether that was enough time to trust her with his life. Sir, you're bleeding significantly. She moved to the supply cart, gathering what she needed. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of infection. He studied her in a way that made her skin prickle, not sexual exactly, though there was something unsettlingly intimate about it, more like he was cataloging every detail. The flyaway strands escaping her bun, the shadows under her eyes, the small coffee stain on her scrubs, the way her hands didn't quite shake even though they wanted to. Leave us, he said. The 2 guards exchanged glances. One of them started to protest in a language Alina didn't recognize. Now. A single word, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The kind of voice that had never learned to ask because it had never needed to. They left without another word. Alina found herself alone with a stranger who radiated danger like heat from asphalt in summer. She cleared her throat. I need to see the wound. He continued watching her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began unbuttoning his shirt with one hand, the other pressed against his side where the fabric was soaked through. Let me help. She reached for the buttons. His hand caught her wrist, fingers circling completely, warm despite the blood loss. Surprisingly gentle, despite the obvious strength. She could feel her pulse jumping against his thumb. Your hands are shaking, he observed. 16-hour shift, she said. Nothing coffee won't fix. Something flickered across his face, almost amusement. There, he said softly, releasing her wrist. Honesty. I appreciate that. She finished unbuttoning his shirt, carefully peeling back the fabric where blood had dried and stuck to skin. The wound was a clean slice, 4 inches long, running along his ribs. Deep enough to need stitches, but not deep enough for surgery. Next to it, an older scar, a bullet wound, puckered and pink with healing. This man was no stranger to violence. Knife wound, she said, reaching for antiseptic. Recent. What happened? Does it matter? It helps me determine infection risk. Knife wounds carry different bacteria than... It was a very clean knife. She met his eyes. They were cooler than the rain outside, and twice as sharp. This will sting. She expected him to flinch when the antiseptic hit. He didn't even blink. His breathing stayed steady, controlled, while his gaze remained fixed on her face rather than her hands. What's your name? He asked as she prepared the suture kit. I told you, Alina. Alina, he repeated, tasting the syllables. You're not afraid. I've treated gang members, overdoses, and drunk businessmen who think their money makes them bulletproof. She threaded the curved needle. You're just another patient. His mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Then treat me, Alina. Just another patient. She began the first stitch. He didn't tense, didn't grab the railing, didn't make a sound. Just watched her work with that unnerving intensity, like she was the most fascinating thing in his world. Where did you learn to suture so precisely? His voice was quieter now, almost conversational. Your technique is excellent. My grandmother was a seamstress, taught me to sew before I could write. Alina tied off a knot, though she probably never imagined I'd use it like this. Life rarely follows the paths we imagine. Something in his tone made her glance up. For just a moment, she saw past the ice in his eyes to something else. Something tired and resigned, and almost human. No, she agreed softly. It doesn't. They fell into silence as she worked. 17 stitches total. His skin was hot beneath her gloved fingers. His breathing controlled, but occasionally hitching when she hit a sensitive spot. Halfway through, one of the guards slipped back inside, bending to whisper urgently in her patient's ear. Her patient's expression darkened. He responded in that same foreign language. Short, clipped, final. The guard disappeared immediately. Almost done, Alina said, focusing on the final sutures. She could feel tension radiating from him now, coiled muscles and carefully controlled fury. She tied off the last knot and reached for sterile dressing. You need to keep this dry for 48 hours. Change the dressing daily. No strenuous activity. He stood. Alina found herself suddenly aware of how he towered over her. At least 6'3" to her 5'5". The small bay seemed to shrink further with his presence, all that contained danger unfolding to its full height. Thank you. He shrugged into his jacket with careful movements. From his inner pocket he withdrew a money clip that made her eyes widen, thick with $100 bills. He peeled off several and held them out to her. She stepped back. I can't accept that. You need it. Heat flashed through her. That's not... I can't take cash from patients. It's unethical. Ethics. He said the word like it amused him. Then, before she could protest further, he tucked the bills into the pocket of her scrubs. Consider it a consultation fee for your discretion. The implication was crystal clear. No records, no questions, no police reports about mysterious knife wounds. Alina should have refused. Should have reported it immediately. Should have done a dozen things that would have kept her life exactly as small and safe and controlled as she'd spent 3 years making it. Instead, she found herself nodding. He reached out suddenly, fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. The contact was fleeting, barely a touch, but it left her skin tingling like she'd been burned. You look exhausted, Alina. His voice dropped lower, almost intimate. Go home. Rest. Then he was gone. The curtain swishing closed behind him, the ghost of his presence lingering like smoke. Alina stood frozen, heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Only when she moved to clean up did she realize he'd never given his name. She finished her shift in a daze, the encounter feeling increasingly surreal as the night progressed. By the time she clocked out at 6 a.m., exhaustion had settled into her bones like lead. The morning air was cool against her face as she exited through the staff entrance, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. Her apartment was 15 blocks away. Normally she'd take the bus, but the morning was clear, and maybe the walk would help clear her head. She made it 2 blocks before she noticed the black SUV. It crawled along the street parallel to her path, windows tinted so dark they reflected the rising sun like mirrors. Alina quickened her pace, adrenaline cutting through exhaustion. The vehicle accelerated slightly, keeping perfect pace. Her building came into view, a shabby 5-story walk-up that had seen better days sometime before she was born. As she approached, the SUV pulled ahead, stopping at the curb half a block up. No one got out. Alina fumbled with her keys, hands shaking now for real, and shouldered through the security door that hadn't been secure since the 90s. Inside, she took the stairs 2 at a time, not trusting the ancient elevator. Her studio was on the 4th floor. By the time she reached her door, her lungs burned and her legs trembled. She locked the door, slid the chain into place, and went straight to her single window. The black SUV was still there. As she watched, a second identical vehicle pulled up behind it, then a third. Alina backed away from the window, heart in her throat. The money from her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. $2,500 in crisp $100 bills. More than her rent. More than she'd seen in one place in years. It sat on her scarred coffee table like evidence, like a contract she'd signed without reading the fine print. She tried to sleep. Failed. The SUVs remained below, silent sentinels that felt more like a promise than a threat. When the pounding came at her door 12 hours later, aggressive, insistent, commanding, Alina already knew. The man she'd bandaged wasn't the kind you walked away from. And somehow, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, she understood. By saving his life, she'd forfeited her own. The pounding jerked Alina awake like a gunshot. She bolted upright on her futon, heart slamming against her ribs, disoriented by the slant of golden light streaming through her window. The digital clock on her microwave read 4:37 p.m. She'd slept through most of the day, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion sometime around noon. The pounding came again, harder, more insistent. Miss Marek. Alina Marek. A man's voice, deep, unfamiliar, professional. She approached the door on unsteady legs, peering through the peephole. A man in a black suit stood in her dingy hallway, hands clasped in front of him, face impassive. Different from the guards at the hospital, but cut from the same dangerous cloth. "Who are you?" she called through the door. "Mr. Vero sent me." A pause. "He requires your professional assistance." Vero. At least she had a name now. "Tell Mr. Vero to go to the hospital if he's experiencing complications. Mr. Vero sent a car for you." The man's tone remained perfectly neutral. "You'll be compensated generously for your time." Alina pressed her forehead against the door, closing her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere with someone I don't know to treat a man I barely met." Silence. Then the rustle of fabric, the distinctive sound of a phone being dialed. The man spoke quietly, his words muffled by the door between them. A moment later, "Mr. Vero would like to speak with you." Before she could protest, something slid under her door. A phone. Sleek. Black. Expensive. The screen glowed with an incoming call. With trembling fingers, Alina picked it up and held it to her ear. "Hello, Alina." That voice. Low, accented, unmistakable, but rougher now, strained with something that might have been pain. "Mr. Vero." She fought to keep her voice steady. "I'm a hospital nurse. I don't make house calls." Yet here we are. A pause filled with labored breathing. "The wound has become infected. I require antibiotics, possibly new sutures." "Then go to the hospital." "We both know that's not an option for me." Alina glanced at the money still sitting on her coffee table. Untouched. Damning. "Why me?" "You must know other medical professionals." The silence stretched long enough that she thought the call had dropped. Then, "I trust your hands, Alina. They're steady, even when you're afraid." Something about the way he said it made heat flush through her, then cold. "I could lose my license. No one will know." His voice softened, which somehow made it more dangerous. "And you'll be helping someone in need. Isn't that what you swore to do?" The oath he referenced was for doctors, not nurses. But she didn't correct him. "How bad is the infection?" "Bad enough that my men are concerned." Which meant very bad, if those stone-faced guards were showing worry. "Mr. Vero." "Cassian." The correction was gentle but firm. "And I'm running out of time, Alina. As are you." The threat beneath his words wasn't even veiled. "Meaning?" "Meaning, if you refuse, I'll be forced to find another solution. Perhaps someone else at Mercy General who might recognize me from security footage." A pause. "Dr. Patel, wasn't it? The one who assigned you to me?" Ice flooded her veins. He was threatening Patel, threatening to drag her colleagues into whatever dark world he inhabited. "That's practical," he finished. "I need medical care. You can provide it willingly, or I can ensure someone else is motivated to help. The choice is yours." It wasn't a choice at all. They both knew it. Alina closed her eyes, knowing she was about to cross a line she could never uncross. "I need supplies. Antibiotics, sterile dressings." "Already acquired. The car will take you to my residence and return you home before midnight." "And if I refuse?" "You won't." Certainty in his voice, like he could see through the phone to where she stood, trapped between her locked door and her conscience. "You're too good a person to let someone suffer. Even someone like me." The line went dead. Alina stood frozen, the phone clutched in her hand. Outside her window, the black SUVs remained in formation, patient as monuments. She counted them now. 5 vehicles where there had been 3 this morning. The street below looked like a motorcade for a dignitary, or a crime boss. "Miss Marek?" The man in the hallway again. "We should leave soon. Mr. Vero's condition is worsening." She looked around her apartment. The water-stained ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the medical school textbooks she couldn't bring herself to throw away. 3 years she'd spent building this small, safe life. 3 years of keeping her head down, staying invisible, existing rather than living. Maybe she'd been a prisoner long before today. Alina threw on jeans and a clean sweater, pulled her hair into a bun, and grabbed her medical bag, a habit from her med school days she'd never abandoned. When she opened the door, the suited man was waiting patiently, expression neutral. "This way, Miss Marek." He led her downstairs and out to a black SUV, one of many. As she approached, another suited man opened the rear door. She hesitated on the sidewalk, some final vestige of self-preservation screaming at her to run. Then she thought of Patel, of the other nurses, of what men like Cassian Vero did to people who got in their way. She slid into the back seat, The door had barely closed when someone placed a blindfold over her eyes. "What the hell?" She jerked back, hands flying up. Strong fingers caught her wrists. Not rough, but immovable. "Security protocol, Miss Marek. Mr. Vero's residence location is confidential." "This wasn't part of the deal." Her voice sounded thin, frightened. "It's non-negotiable." The hands released her wrists. "We'll remove it when we arrive." The engine purred to life. The vehicle pulled smoothly away from the curb, and Alina sat rigid in darkness, every instinct screaming danger while her training whispered about infection and sepsis and a man who might die if she didn't help. She tried to track the turns, left, then right, then a long stretch of what felt like highway. But the driver made so many turns, she quickly lost all sense of direction. The smooth city asphalt eventually gave way to rougher roads, the SUV swaying gently as they curved up what felt like an incline. Time became elastic in the darkness. What might have been 20 minutes felt like hours. Finally, the vehicle slowed, stopped. The engine's purr faded to silence. The door beside her opened, letting in a rush of cool evening air that smelled of pine and rain-damp earth. Nothing like the city. Nothing like Brooklyn. "We've arrived, Miss Marek." The blindfold was removed. Alina blinked against the intrusion of twilight, and her breath caught. They were in a circular driveway before a mansion that belonged in architectural magazines. Modern lines softened by mature trees, walls of glass reflecting the dying sun, a stone fountain at the drive's center sending water cascading over dark rock. It wasn't ostentatious. There was too much taste for that. But the wealth it represented was staggering. And everywhere, men in dark suits. Patrolling the perimeter, standing at attention near the entrance. Some with weapons visible at their sides. An armed fortress disguised as a home. "Miss Marek." A new voice, older, gruff. A silver-haired man approached, his suit impeccable, his eyes assessing her with open skepticism. "I'm Marco Vitale, head of Mr. Vero's security. This way." He led her up wide stone steps into an entrance hall that took her breath away. Soaring ceilings, museum-quality art, the kind of quiet that only extreme wealth could buy. But beneath the luxury, she sensed something else. Tension. Men speaking in urgent whispers, weapons being checked, the atmosphere of an army preparing for war. "What's happening?" she asked as Marco led her toward a sweeping staircase. "Mr. Vero will explain." His tone made it clear no further questions would be answered. They climbed to the second floor, moved through a corridor lined with closed doors, and stopped before massive double doors at the hall's end. Marco knocked once. A voice from within, hoarse, strained, called out something in Italian. The doors opened. The bedroom beyond was larger than her entire apartment, dominated by an enormous bed with charcoal linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked darkening woods. A fire crackled in a modern fireplace, casting dancing shadows. And there, propped against a mountain of pillows, was Cassian Vero. He looked worse. So much worse. Skin ashen beneath its olive tone, hair damp with fever sweat, those ice-gray eyes burning with unnatural brightness. The bandage she'd applied was visible above his open shirt collar, stained with yellowish discharge. But even weakened, even dying, he radiated that same dangerous magnetism. His gaze found hers across the room. Alina. Her name on his lips, relief and possession tangled together. "Thank you for coming." As if she'd had a choice. As if she wasn't standing in a fortified mansion, surrounded by armed men, about to treat a man who could destroy her life with a single word. Marco withdrew, closing the doors with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Alina was alone with Cassian Vero. And this time, there was no walking away. The room smelled wrong. Beneath the cedar smoke from the fireplace and the faint trace of expensive cologne, Alina detected something else. The sweet, sick odor of infected tissue. Her medical instincts went on high alert as she approached the bed, professional assessment overriding fear. "Everyone out," she said, setting her bag on the nightstand. No one moved. Cassian's eyes tracked her through the fever haze. You heard her. Salvatore, Marco began. Out. The word emerged rough, strained, but absolute. Marco's jaw tightened. Two other men flanked the bed, one lean and sharp-featured with wire-rimmed glasses, the other built like a wall with a shaved head and cold eyes. Neither looked inclined to leave their boss vulnerable with a stranger. The infection is spreading, Alina said flatly, meeting Marco's gaze. Every minute we waste arguing is a minute closer to septic shock. So either let me work or watch him die. Your choice. The sharp-featured man spoke, his accent British crisp. She has a point, Marco. Marco studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. 10 minutes. We'll be right outside. He looked at Cassian. Call if you need us. They filed out reluctantly. The door closed with that same weighted finality. Alina turned to Cassian. In the firelight, he looked younger somehow, vulnerable in a way that made her chest tighten inexplicably. His skin glistened with fever sweat, dark hair plastered to his forehead. Let me see. She moved to the bed, already snapping on latex gloves. He began unbuttoning his shirt with clumsy fingers. She took over, working quickly. When she peeled back the bandage, her stomach dropped. The wound was angry red, radiating heat like a brand. The neat suture line she'd created had begun to break down, edges weeping purulent discharge. Red streaks tracked up toward his armpit, lymphangitis. The infection was marching toward his bloodstream. Christ, she whispered. When did this start? This morning. Got worse. Throughout the day. His words came slower now, slurred slightly. Knew I needed you. Alina dug through her bag, pulling out supplies with controlled urgency. I need to debride this. Cut away the infected tissue. It's going to hurt. Always does. A ghost of a smile. Do what you need to do. She worked quickly, laying out instruments on the nightstand with the precision of ritual. Scalpel, forceps, sterile gauze. She'd done this before in the field during her med school rotations, but never like this. Never in a mansion that felt more like a fortress, treating a man who might have her killed if she failed. This is going to hurt, she warned again, preparing an antiseptic solution. I knew you'd come. His eyes found hers, fever bright but strangely lucid. Even when you were afraid. I knew. Something in his certainty unsettled her more than any threat could have. She focused on the wound, using gauze to clean away discharge and dead tissue. He flinched, the first real reaction to pain she'd seen from him, but didn't make a sound. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why me? You clearly have resources. That Dr. Vega Marco mentioned. Vega is competent, but distant, available only when convenient. Cassian's breathing hitched as she probed deeper. You're different. You care, even when you shouldn't. The scalpel felt heavy in her hand. I'm going to make an incision to drain the abscess. Try not to move. She made the cut clean and quick. Purulent fluid welled up, and Cassian's entire body went rigid. His hand shot out, gripping the sheets with white-knuckled force, but he didn't pull away. Good, she murmured, irrigating the wound with saline. Almost done. The door burst open. 3 men spilled in. Marco, the British man, and someone new. A woman with platinum blonde hair pulled back severely, wearing tactical gear that looked military grade. Her hand rested on the weapon at her hip. What did you do to him? The woman's accent was Russian, her eyes ice cold. My job, Alina snapped, not looking up. Unless you want to finish, I suggest you get out. Rena, Cassian's voice, weak but commanding. Stand down. The woman, Rena, didn't move. She's cutting into you. She's saving my life. He met Alina's eyes. Aren't you? Trying to? She packed the wound with antibiotic-soaked gauze. But I need quiet. And space. And for people to stop bursting in here like this is a spectator sport. The British man actually smiled. I like her. She's got spine. Elias. Marco's tone carried a warning. What? It's refreshing. Elias, the sharp-featured man, adjusted his glasses. Most people would be weeping by now. Alina ignored them, focused on starting an IV line in Cassian's arm. His veins were harder to find now, collapsed slightly from dehydration. She got it on the second try, hanging a bag of saline mixed with broad-spectrum antibiotics. He needs constant monitoring for the next 12 hours, she said, checking his pulse. Too fast. His skin felt like fire beneath her fingers. His fever's 103, maybe higher. If it doesn't break soon, you'll stay. Not a question. Cassian's hand caught her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong despite his condition. Promise me you'll stay. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to demand they take her home immediately. But looking at his fever-bright eyes, feeling his pulse racing beneath her fingertips, she knew he might not survive the night without intervention. I'll stay, she heard herself say, but only to monitor the infection. Relief flickered across his face before exhaustion pulled him under. His grip on her wrist loosened, and his breathing evened out into something closer to sleep. Marco approached the bedside, his expression unreadable. What does he need? Rest. Fluids. The antibiotics should start working within a few hours. Alina checked the IV drip. If his fever spikes above 104, or if he becomes unconscious, we'll need to consider hospital transport. That's not an option. Then pray the antibiotics work. She met his gaze directly. Because I'm a nurse, not a miracle worker. Elias moved closer, studying the monitors she'd set up with professional interest. Impressive work, Miss Marek. You've done this before. I was in med school. Before, she cut herself off. Before you dropped out to become a nurse. Elias's smile was knowing. Yes, we're aware. Johns Hopkins, wasn't it? Top of your class until your fiancé's death. Heat flashed through her. Anger at the invasion of privacy, the casual way they discussed her pain like data points in a file. How much do you people know about me? Everything. Rena spoke from near the door, her hand still resting on her weapon. Address, work schedule, debt, medical history, the hospital security footage of you treating him. Everything. The room felt suddenly smaller, airless. And if I'd refused to come? Then we would have found another way to motivate you. Marco's tone held no apology. Salvatore Vero doesn't take chances with his life, or with loose ends. Loose ends. Is that what she was? Get some rest, Miss Marek, Elias said, gesturing to a leather chair near the fireplace. We'll wake you if his condition changes, though I suspect you'll be checking on him every hour regardless. He was right. She would. Alina sank into the chair, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Through the windows, she could see the grounds, and the men patrolling them. More than when she'd arrived. At least a dozen dark figures moving with military precision through the twilight. Rena followed her gaze. More than before, she murmured, moving to stand at the window. He called in reinforcements. Why? Alina asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Rena's reflection in the glass was impassive. Because someone's hunting him. And now that you're here, she turned, fixing Alina with that ice-cold stare. They're hunting you too. The words hung in the air like smoke. Cassian stirred in his sleep, murmuring something in Italian. His fever made him restless, one hand reaching for something that wasn't there. Without thinking, Alina rose and moved to the bedside. She checked his temperature, still 103, then adjusted his blankets. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers curling around hers with surprising gentleness. Stay, he whispered, eyes still closed. Please. She should have pulled away, should have reminded herself he was dangerous, that she was trapped, that every minute here dragged her deeper into a world she didn't understand. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed and held his hand. I'm here, she said softly. I'm not going anywhere. Outside, the patrol doubled. Inside, the fire burned low. And somewhere in the darkness, something was coming for them both. Alina woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed beneath her was too soft, the sheets too smooth, the ceiling above her coffered with dark wood instead of water-stained plaster. Then memory crashed back. Cassian, the infection, the mansion surrounded by armed men. She sat up quickly, heart hammering. She wasn't in the chair by Cassian's bed anymore. Someone had moved her. The room was enormous, a guest suite decorated in soft grays and creams, with French doors opening onto a private balcony. Her medical bag sat on a dresser, next to a folded set of clothes that definitely weren't hers. Designer labels, her exact size. The door opened without a knock. Rena entered carrying a breakfast tray, her platinum hair still pulled back severely, now wearing fitted black pants and a crisp white shirt that somehow made her look even more dangerous. "Good morning, Miss Marek. You slept through the alarm you set." Alina's hand went to her watch. 8:47 a.m. She'd meant to check Cassian's vitals at 6. Why didn't anyone wake me? Mr. Vero's orders. His fever broke at 4 a.m. Dr. Vega examined him at 7. He's stable. Rena set the tray on a small table near the windows. "You're to eat? Then he'll see you." "He'll see me?" The phrasing rankled. "I'm his nurse, not a supplicant seeking an audience." Something like amusement flickered in Rena's cold eyes. "In this house, everyone seeks an audience with Salvatore Vero. Even the woman who saved his life." She moved to the door. "Breakfast first, then Elias will escort you." "I don't need an escort." "You do." Rena's tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. "The estate has security protocols. You don't move without accompaniment." She left before Alina could argue. The breakfast was elaborate. Fresh fruit, pastries, an omelet that looked professionally prepared. Alina ate mechanically, her mind racing. She'd been moved while sleeping, watched, guarded. The suite was beautiful, but the locked door, she'd already checked, made it a cage. 20 minutes later, Elias appeared, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. "Miss Marek, I trust you slept well?" "As well as anyone being held against their will." His smile was genuine. Direct. "I appreciate that." "Most people dance around the truth here." He gestured to the hallway. "Shall we? Salvatore is anxious to thank you properly." They walked through corridors that felt more like a museum. Original artwork, sculptures, furniture that belonged in European estates. But everywhere, the presence of armed men. Subtle, professional, inescapable. "How long have you worked for him?" Alina asked. 12 years. I was his father's financial advisor. When Antonio died, Salvatore asked me to stay." Elias's expression softened slightly. He was barely 21, too young to inherit an empire, but he learned quickly. "An empire?" She said it flatly. "You mean a criminal organization?" Elias glanced at her with something like respect. "I mean a family business with complex international interests. But yes, some of those interests exist in morally gray areas. There's nothing gray about what you people do. Isn't there?" He stopped before a door, hand on the knob. "You saved his life, knowing exactly what he was. That's not gray?" The words hit harder than they should have. Alina had no answer. Elias opened the door to a study. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive fireplace, and windows overlooking the estate's grounds. Cassian sat behind a desk that looked carved from a single ancient tree, dressed in a black shirt and slacks, his color returned though shadows still lingered beneath his eyes. He looked up when she entered, and something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or possession. "Alina, thank you for coming." As if she'd had a choice. He gestured to Elias. "Leave us." Elias withdrew, closing the door with that same weighted finality. "You should be in bed," Alina said, moving closer. Professional. Clinical. "The infection may be under control. but you need rest. I've rested enough. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with unsettling intensity. How are you feeling? I'm not your patient. No, you're my guest. He gestured to a chair across from him. Please, sit. She remained standing. I'd like to go home now. You're stable. Dr. Vega can monitor your recovery. I'm afraid that's not possible yet. Ice slid down her spine. Why not? Cassian rose slowly, moving around the desk with careful movements that betrayed lingering pain. He was still tall, still commanding, but there was something different now. A calculation in his eyes that hadn't been there through the fever. Because the men who tried to reach me know about you. He picked up a manila folder from his desk. They've been watching you for weeks, Alina, long before you treated me at Mercy General. Her breath caught. That's not possible. He opened the folder, spreading photographs across the desk. Alina's hands went numb. They were surveillance photos of her, leaving the hospital, walking to her apartment, sitting in a coffee shop, buying groceries, dozens of images spanning weeks, maybe months. What is this? Her voice came out strangled. Evidence that you were targeted before we ever met. Cassian's tone was gentle, which made it worse. Victor Dane, my rival, has been looking for leverage against me for months. When his men saw you treat me at the hospital, they assumed you were already mine. Someone I valued. Someone worth taking. Alina's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, staring at the photos. This can't be real. I wish it weren't. He moved closer, crouching beside her chair so their eyes were level. But it is. And now you're in danger. Real danger. The kind that doesn't end with a polite conversation. So what? I'm supposed to stay here? Become your prisoner indefinitely? You're not a prisoner, you're under my protection. What's the difference? His jaw tightened. The difference is that prisoners aren't given a choice. You have one. Do I? She met his gaze directly. Because it sounds like you're saying I can either stay here willingly or be taken by your enemies. That's not a choice. That's coercion. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. Most people are too afraid to speak to me like that. Maybe they should be less afraid. Maybe you need someone to tell you the truth. She gestured at the photos. You've been investigating me. My family, my debts, my trauma. You know things I never told anyone. That's not protection, Cassian. That's invasion. Knowledge is protection. He rose, returning to his desk. Your brother died of an overdose 3 years ago. Your fiancé was killed 6 months later. You dropped out of med school, racked up $137,000 in debt, and spent 3 years working night shifts to pay for your grandmother's dementia care while living in a 4th-floor walk-up with broken security. Each fact landed like a blow. Stop! You're barely surviving, Alina. 1 missed paycheck from homelessness. 1 emergency from complete collapse. And you're angry at me for seeing what everyone else ignores? His voice softened. You're a woman with surgeon's hands and a survivor's heart, and the world has been slowly destroying you. Tears burned behind her eyes. Don't romanticize this. Don't make it sound noble or protective. You're controlling me because you can. I'm protecting you because I must. He opened a drawer, pulling out another document. Your rent has been paid for 6 months. Your grandmother's care facility received a donation covering her expenses for a year. Your student loans have been restructured with 0 interest. She stared at him, speechless. I don't romanticize control, Alina. I simply exercise it where necessary. He met her gaze steadily. You saved my life. I'm ensuring yours doesn't fall apart while you're safe here. Safe? She laughed bitterly. I'm surrounded by armed men in a mansion I can't leave, being told my life was in danger before I even knew your name. That's not safety. That's captivity with better furniture. Cassian was silent for a long moment. Then he pressed a button on his desk. Marco. The door opened immediately. Marco entered, his expression unreadable. Show Miss Marek the East Wing security footage from last night. Marco hesitated. Salvatore, are you certain? Show her. Marco moved to a panel on the wall, revealing a large screen. He pulled up footage time-stamped 3:47 a.m. The camera showed the estate's perimeter fence. 3 figures in dark clothing approached from the woods. They moved with military precision, cutting through the fence with equipment that looked professional grade. And they made it 10 feet before spotlights flooded the area and armed guards converged. The feed cut to black. They came for you, Cassian said quietly. While you slept. While my fever broke. They knew you were here. And they came. Alina's hands trembled. What happened to them? What needed to happen? His tone offered no details, no comfort. This is the world you're in now, Alina. Not because I brought you into it, but because Victor Dane did. The only question is whether you trust me to keep you alive. She looked at the photos again, weeks of surveillance, a stranger watching her every move. Then at the security footage, armed men cutting through fences in the dead of night. Why should I trust you? She whispered. Cassian moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. Because unlike everyone else in your life, I see exactly who you are, and I'm not asking you to be less. The words hung between them, promise and threat tangled together. Outside the windows, the guards doubled their patrols, and somewhere beyond the gates, Victor Dane was planning his next move. You had me watched. Alina's voice was deadly quiet. For weeks. Before I ever treated you. Why? Cassian returned to his desk, moving with the careful precision of someone still healing. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, whiskey, by the smell, and slid one across to her. She didn't touch it. 6 months ago, he began, his accent thickening slightly. You treated a man in your ER, gunshot wound to the shoulder. He gave a false name, Robert Chen. You stabilized him, asked no questions, filed your report professionally. Alina's mind raced back. She remembered, middle of the night, a quiet man who'd thanked her in broken English, then disappeared before the police arrived for their standard interview. What does that have to do with anything? Robert Chen was actually Dmitry Volkov, Rena's cousin. Cassian took a slow sip of his drink. He was running from Victor Dane's men. You saved his life, which meant you'd unknowingly aided my organization. The glass in his hand caught the light, scattering amber across the desk. After that night, I had you watched. Not as a threat, as a precaution. Victor has eyes everywhere. If he knew one of my people had been treated by you, he might use you to find us. It was pure risk management. Risk management. She tasted the words, bitter as poison. You mean I was a liability? You were a variable, an unknown. His eyes met hers. Until I walked into your ER 3 nights ago and realized the woman my men had been monitoring was the same woman with steady hands and fearless eyes who refused my money. Alina stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, men patrolled with weapons visible now, no pretense of subtlety. So, this was always inevitable. Me being dragged into your world? It wasn't fate or chance. It was surveillance and calculation. It was protection that became something else. Cassian rose, moving to stand beside her at the window. I didn't plan to need you, didn't plan to trust you. But when that knife opened my side, when my fever burned and my men looked at me like I was already dead, he paused. I thought of you. The woman who'd patched up Dmitry without hesitation, who'd filed paperwork that kept him off police radar. I thought she would help, even knowing the danger. You thought you could manipulate me. I thought you were decent, in a world where decency is rarer than diamonds. He gestured to the estate grounds. This empire was built on my father's corpse. Did Marco tell you that? She shook her head. Cassian's jaw tightened. Antonio Vero was murdered 12 years ago. Shot 7 times in front of our home. The old one, in Red Hook. I was 21, finishing my economics degree at Columbia, pretending I could escape into legitimate business. His voice went distant. Victor Dane ordered it. A power play. He wanted our shipping contracts, our political connections. He thought killing my father would scatter us. But it didn't. No. The word was flat, hard. It forged me. Marco gathered the loyalists. Elias secured our finances. Rena trained our soldiers. And I learned every lesson my father never wanted me to know. How to rule through fear, how to make men choose loyalty over life, how to turn vengeance into empire. Alina studied his reflection in the window. You became exactly what your father died fighting against. I became what was necessary. His eyes found hers in the glass. Within 2 years, I'd reclaimed everything Dane took. Within 5, I'd expanded into territories he considered untouchable. My father built something beautiful. I built something that couldn't be destroyed. At what cost? Every cost that mattered. He turned to face her directly. I've killed men, Alina. Ordered deaths, destroyed families. I don't pretend to be good. I don't ask for redemption. I simply exist in a world where hesitation is death and mercy is suicide. She wanted to recoil, wanted to condemn him. But standing there, seeing the scars beneath his controlled exterior, she recognized something familiar. The way trauma reshapes you into someone you never meant to become. My brother died 3 years ago, she heard herself say. Tomas. He was 19, an art student with scholarship potential and a future that looked nothing like mine. Cassian went very still. He was walking home from a gallery opening in Tribeca. Wrong place, wrong time. Caught in crossfire between 2 rival crews fighting over territory. Her voice cracked. Took a bullet to the chest. Bled out before the ambulance arrived. Alina. They never caught the shooters. Never even identified which organizations were involved. Just another statistic. Another kid who died because men like you treat city streets like war zones. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither could unsay. What was the date? Cassian's voice was barely audible. March 17th. 3 years ago. He moved to his desk, pulling up something on his computer with sharp, precise keystrokes. His face went ashen as he read. No, he whispered. What? The Tribeca incident. March 17th. He turned the screen toward her. It was my men, responding to a Dane ambush. We lost 2 soldiers that night, and there was civilian collateral damage. 1 fatality. Male, 19 years old. The world tilted. Alina stared at the report. Clinical, detailed. Brutal in its brevity. Civilian casualty, acceptable losses, location secured. Your men killed my brother. The words came out hollow, distant, like someone else was speaking. I didn't know. Cassian's control cracked, something like horror bleeding through. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had... What? What would you have done differently? She laughed, a broken sound. Would you have stopped the war? Called a truce? Or would Tomas still be dead while you justified it as necessary casualties? I would have found you. His voice was raw. I would have paid me off? Threatened me into silence? She moved toward him, fury and grief tangled together. You don't get to rewrite this, Cassian. You don't get to make it better. Your world, your empire built on vengeance, it killed my brother. And then 3 years later, I saved your life without knowing I was saving the man whose organization destroyed mine. Alina, please, don't. Tears burned hot down her cheeks. Don't make this about redemption or fate or twisted connection. You're a killer who got lucky enough to be patched up by the sister of one of your victims. That's all this is. Cassian reached for her. That's not... The window exploded. Glass shattered inward in a crystalline wave. Cassian moved faster than thought, his body slamming into hers, driving them both to the floor behind the desk as a second bullet punched through where her head had been seconds before. The world became chaos, shouting, running footsteps, the sharp crack of return fire from the grounds. Cassian covered her completely, his weight pressing her into the Persian rug, his breath hot against her ear. Don't move. Stay down. Alina's hands came up to push him away and came back wet. Blood, not hers. Cassian, I'm fine. But his voice was strained, tight with pain. She shoved at him, forcing space between them. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, blood welling from a graze where the glass or bullet had caught him. You're hit. It's nothing. He tried to keep her pinned, but she was already moving, already assessing the wound with hands that had steadied the moment crisis hit. The door burst open. Marco, Rena, and 4 armed guards flooded in, weapons drawn. Sniper on the north ridge, Rena barked into her comm. Long range. I want him dead or delivered. Now. Marco dropped beside them, eyes scanning for injuries. Salvatore? I'm fine. Secure the house. Cassian's gaze never left Alina's face. Get her to the safe room. No. Alina pressed gauze from her pocket, a nurse's habit, always carrying supplies, against his shoulder. You're bleeding. Again. Because of me. Because of Victor Dane. His hand covered hers, pressing the gauze tighter. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? She met his eyes, her face still wet with tears, now spattered with his blood. My brother died in your war. You're bleeding because I'm here. How many more people have to pay for the world you built? Before he could answer, Rena hauled her to her feet. Move. Now. They dragged her from the study, through corridors that had become combat zones, downstairs into a basement level she hadn't known existed. A steel door, biometric locks, a room lined with monitors showing every angle of the estate. On screen, she watched Cassian standing in his destroyed study, blood on his shoulder, ordering men with cold precision. The man who'd murdered her brother's killers. The man who'd just taken a bullet meant for her. The man whose world kept bleeding into hers until she couldn't tell where tragedy ended and fate began. The safe room felt like a tomb. Steel walls, recycled air, banks of monitors showing the estate transformed into a war zone, men moving in tactical formation, vehicles arriving with reinforcements. The beautiful mansion grounds now lit by floodlights that turned shadows into threats. Alina sat on a metal bench, hands still trembling, watching it all unfold on screens. Drink this. Rena thrust a bottle of water at her. She took it automatically but didn't drink. On the center monitor, Cassian stood in the main hall, blood still seeping through his shoulder, giving orders with the cold precision of a general. His shirt was ruined, his face carved from stone, but his voice, even through the audio feed, carried absolute authority. How long do we stay down here? Alina asked. Until Jonas clears the perimeter. Rena checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. Could be an hour, could be dawn. He needs medical attention. Dr. Vega is on site. I don't care. Alina stood, moving toward the door. I need to see him. Rena blocked her path. Negative. You stay here until... Until what? Until another sniper takes position? Until Victor Dane sends a full assault team? Alina's voice rose. I'm a nurse. He's bleeding. Get out of my way. Something shifted in Rena's expression. Not quite respect, but acknowledgement. She spoke into her comm. Marco. The nurse wants to check Salvatore's wound. Your call. A pause. Then Marco's voice, crackling through the speaker. Bring her up. Elias will escort. The safe room door opened with a pneumatic hiss. Elias waited outside, his suit somehow still impeccable despite the chaos, though his expression was grimmer than she'd seen. Miss Marek, this way. They moved through corridors that felt different now, harder, colder, every corner a potential threat. Men stood at intervals, weapons visible, eyes tracking her movement with professional assessment. How bad is it? She asked. The sniper was long range, professional. He missed his kill shot by inches. Elias's jaw tightened. Which means Victor is escalating. sending a message. What message? That nowhere is safe, not even here. They reached the master suite. Marco stood guard outside, his weapon drawn, his face a mask of controlled fury. He nodded once to Elias, then opened the door. Cassian sat on the edge of his bed, shirtless, while Dr. Vega, a nervous man in his 50s with thinning hair, attempted to clean the shoulder wound. Blood streaked Cassian's torso, mixing with older bandages from his side injury. He looked up when Alina entered, something unreadable crossing his face. "Leave us," he said to Dr. Vega. The doctor's hands froze. "But Mr. Vero, the wound requires—" "Leave." Vega gathered his supplies with shaking hands and fled. The door closed, leaving Alina alone with Cassian in a room that suddenly felt too intimate despite its size. "You shouldn't be up here," Cassian said, his voice rough with pain or something else. "The safe room is— I don't care about the safe room." She moved to the bed. Medical assessment overriding everything else. "Let me see." He didn't argue. Just watched as she examined the graze across his shoulder, shallow but bleeding steadily, glass fragments embedded in the wound. "This needs to be cleaned properly." Vega left glass in it. She reached for tweezers from the medical kit beside the bed. "This will hurt." "It already hurts." His eyes tracked her movements. "Having you here, knowing you're in danger because of me, that hurts worse than any bullet." "Don't." She focused on extracting glass shards, each one making him tense. "Don't romanticize this." "I'm not romanticizing. I'm being honest." He caught her wrist, gently, not restraining, as she reached for another piece of glass. "You could have stayed in the safe room. Rena would have kept you secure. But you came up here." "Why?" "Because I needed to see you breathing. Because the thought of you bleeding alone made something in my chest crack open. Because despite everything, my brother, the surveillance, the violence, I can't stop caring whether you live or die." "Because you're my patient," she said instead. "Liar." His thumb moved against her pulse point. "Your heart is racing. You're not here as a nurse." She pulled her hand free, returning to the wound with sharp, precise movements. "Then why am I here, Cassian? Tell me. Since you seem to know everything." "Because you're like me." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the clinical setting. "Trapped between who you were and who you've become. You saved lives. I took them. You healed. I destroyed. But we're both just trying to survive in a world that keeps taking things from us. That's not the same, isn't it?" He winced as she pulled out a particularly deep shard. "You dropped out of med school, became someone smaller, safer, less than what you were meant to be. I became something larger, more dangerous, exactly what I was trying to avoid. We're both running from grief, Alina. I just run toward violence while you run toward silence." The words hit too close. She pressed gauze against his shoulder harder than necessary. "Hold this." He complied, his hand covering hers again. "You remind me of something I thought I'd lost." "What?" "The possibility of touching someone without transaction." His eyes held hers, gray as winter dawn. "Everyone who touches me wants something. Power, money, protection, access. But you touch me to heal. Not because I pay you, not because I threaten you, but because somewhere beneath your anger and fear, you still believe in mercy." Alina's throat tightened. "Mercy is what got me here. What got my brother killed. What keeps people like you in power while people like me just survive." "Then why are you still here?" His hand tightened on hers. "Why not demand I take you home? Walk away from all of this?" "Because—" The door burst open. Jonas, the wall of a man with the shaved head, entered with Marco and Elias, their expressions grave. "We have a problem," Jonas said without preamble. Cassian's entire demeanor shifted, from wounded to dangerous in a heartbeat. "Speak." Elias moved to the monitors built into the bedroom wall, pulling up security footage. We traced the sniper's position, found his equipment. Professional grade, encrypted comm device still active. The screen showed a rifle case, high-powered scope, and a small digital tablet displaying a map. "That's the hospital," Alina whispered, recognizing the layout. "Yes." Elias's expression was sympathetic but firm. "The tracker was placed 3 weeks ago, in your medical bag. Victor's men tagged you at Mercy General, before you treated Salvatore. They've been following you ever since." The room tilted. "That's not possible." But even as she said it, Alina remembered the night her bag was stolen from the staff locker room, returned 2 days later with everything intact. She'd thought it was a mistake, a thief who'd grabbed the wrong bag. "They used you," Marco said bluntly. "Victor knew Salvatore had people watching you after the Dimitri incident. He planted the tracker knowing you'd eventually lead us, or Salvatore, somewhere vulnerable." Cassian stood slowly, fury radiating from him like heat. "How long?" 3 weeks. Every movement she made, they tracked. When she was called to Bay 4 that night, they knew she'd treat you. They waited for you to bring her here." Elias's voice was clinical, detached. "She's not collateral damage, Salvatore. She's the bait that brought you out of hiding." Alina's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the bed, the weight of it crushing her. "I led them here. The sniper, the assault, all of it is because of me." "No." Cassian moved to her, tilting her face up with bloodied fingers. "It's because Victor Dane will use anyone, destroy anything to get to me. You're not responsible for his evil." "But I am responsible for saving you." Her voice broke. "If I'd just called the police that night, if I'd refused to come here, if I'd been anyone else, then I'd be dead." His grip tightened. "And you'd be exactly where Victor wants you. Guilty, isolated, easy to take. At least here, you're protected." "Protected?" She laughed bitterly. "Your window was just shot out. Your estate is under siege. How is this protection?" "Because 50 of my men stand between you and Victor Dane." Cassian's voice was steel. "Because every breath you take is guarded by people who would die before letting you be harmed. Because I won't let him have you, Alina. Not now. Not ever." The possessiveness in his tone should have terrified her. Instead, it sparked something else. Anger and desire tangled together until she couldn't separate them. "You don't own me." "No." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her lips. "But I'll protect you anyway, whether you want me to or not." Outside, the floodlights blazed. Inside, the space between them crackled with things neither could name. And somewhere in the darkness, Victor Dane was watching, waiting for his next move. Chapter 7. The Infection and the Fire. The fever returned at midnight. Alina was washing blood from her hands in the ensuite bathroom when she heard Cassian's breathing change, shallow, rapid, the telltale rasp of someone whose body was losing a war it couldn't afford to lose. She returned to find him shivering despite the fire blazing in the hearth, his skin burning hot when she pressed her palm to his forehead. "Damn it!" She grabbed her medical bag, pulling out a thermometer. 104.3, dangerously high. The exertion reopened the side wound. "The infection's spreading again." Cassian tried to sit up, his eyes glassy with fever. "I'm fine. I need to—" "You need to lie down before you collapse." She pushed him back against the pillows, already reaching for antibiotics. "Your body is fighting on multiple fronts. The bullet graze, the original knife wound, stress, blood loss. You're not invincible, Cassian. I don't have the luxury of weakness." But his voice was thin, strained. "Victor knows we're vulnerable. If he senses I'm—" "He'll what? Attack a fortress guarded by 50 armed men?" She prepared a syringe, her hands steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Let your people do their jobs. Right now, your job is to survive." She administered the antibiotics through his IV, then began unwrapping the bandage at his side. The original wound had indeed reopened. Not completely, but enough that fresh blood seeped through, mixing with the yellowish discharge that meant infection. "I need to debride this again, Clean out the contaminated tissue. She looked up at him, seeing past the fever to the man who'd taken a bullet for her hours ago. It's going to hurt. A lot. His hand found hers, gripping tight. Then hurt me. Just don't stop. She worked quickly, gathering supplies. Scalpel, forceps, saline, gauze. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Backup generators kicked in, but only emergency lighting remained. The bedroom plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by firelight and the dim glow from the hallway. Perfect timing, Alina muttered, grabbing candles from the nightstand and lighting them with shaking hands. She positioned them around the bed, creating a circle of wavering light. This is insane. I can't perform surgery by candlelight. You can. Cassian's voice was rough but certain. You can do anything, Alina. I've seen it. She met his fever-bright eyes, seeing trust there that terrified her more than any threat. Then she picked up the scalpel. Don't move. The first cut made him tense, every muscle going rigid. But he didn't cry out, didn't pull away, just gripped the sheets with white-knuckled force while she carved away infected tissue, working by firelight like a field surgeon in some ancient war. Blood welled up, slick and hot. Alina's hands moved with practiced precision despite the primitive conditions, cutting, cleaning, irrigating the wound with saline that ran pink with contamination. Almost done, she whispered, more to herself than him. Just a little more. Gunfire erupted outside. Not distant warning shots. Close, sustained, the sharp crack of assault rifles mixed with shouting and the deeper boom of something heavier. Alina's hands froze. Keep going, Cassian's voice cut through the chaos. Don't stop. They'll handle it. Cassian, trust my men. Trust me. His hand shot out, catching her wrist with desperate strength. Blood from the wound mixed with sweat on his skin. Finish it, Alina, please. She forced herself to focus, to block out the gunfire and screaming and the way the windows rattled with each explosion. Her world narrowed to the wound, the scalpel, the precise movements that meant life or death. She debrided the last of the infected tissue, packed the wound with antibiotic gauze, and dressed it with hands that barely trembled. By the time she finished, her scrubs were soaked with his blood, her face streaked with it. Done, she gasped. You're done. Now rest while I... The door burst open. Marco stumbled in, supporting one of the younger guards, a kid who couldn't be older than 20, his leg torn open by shrapnel. We need you, Marco said, his voice tight with controlled panic. We've got 4 wounded. Maybe more coming. The medical suite is compromised, too exposed. Can you work from here? Alina's nursing instincts overrode everything else. Get them in here, all of them. I need more light, more supplies, and someone to help me. Rena's on her way. Marco laid the wounded guard on the floor near the fireplace. This is Luca. Took an RPG fragment to the femur. Alina dropped beside the kid, assessing the wound with rapid efficiency. Arterial bleeding. She pressed gauze hard against the injury. Luca, can you hear me? I need you to stay with me. His eyes rolled, unfocused. Am I dying? Not on my watch. She looked up at Marco. Get me a tourniquet. Now. The next hour became a blur of blood and adrenaline. Rena arrived with 3 more wounded, one with a shoulder injury, another with abdominal trauma, a third with severe burns from an explosion. Cassian's bedroom transformed into a makeshift trauma center, bodies laid out on Persian rugs. Alina moving between them with the cold efficiency of someone who'd trained for exactly this kind of hell. Rena worked beside her, following orders without question, her hands steady as she held pressure on wounds. Administered medications, helped Alina suture and bandage and pray. How many more? Alina asked between patients, her arms aching, her back screaming. This is the last, Rena said. For now. Through it all, Cassian drifted in and out of consciousness, fever pulling him under, then throwing him back to the surface. Once, When Alina moved to check his vitals between patients, his hand caught hers. "If I die," his voice was barely audible. "You're not dying." "If I die," he continued, delirious but determined, "make sure they burn it all. The contracts, the files, the evidence. Everything that could hurt my people. Promise me." "Cassian, you're not—" His grip tightened with surprising strength. "Promise me, Alina. They're my family. Everything I've built. It protects them. If I'm gone, they need to vanish. Please." Tears burned hot in her eyes. "I promise. But you're going to live, damn it. You're going to survive this because I refuse to let you die. Do you understand me?" Something like a smile touched his lips. "Yes, ma'am." The gunfire finally stopped around 2 a.m. Jonas entered the bedroom, his face grim, blood on his tactical vest. "Perimeter secure," he reported. "We took out 12 hostiles, lost 2 of ours, 6 wounded, 4 are here." He looked at the bodies scattered across Cassian's floor, at Alina covered in blood, at his boss burning with fever. "How is he?" "Alive." Alina checked Cassian's pulse, too fast but steady. "The fever should break by morning if the antibiotics work. If they don't—" "They will," Rena said firmly, "because you won't let them fail." Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through shattered windows. The wounded slept fitfully. Alina moved between them, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, offering what comfort she could with hands that wouldn't stop shaking now that the crisis had passed. She returned to Cassian's bedside as the sun crested the horizon. His fever had dropped, 103.1. Still dangerous, but better. His breathing had evened out, and color was returning to his face. She sank into the chair beside him, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Her scrubs were stiff with dried blood. His, Luca's, men whose names she didn't know. Her hands ached. Her eyes burned. But they were alive. All of them. Because she hadn't stopped. Hadn't given up. Cassian's hand found hers in the growing light. "You saved us," he whispered, eyes still closed. "All of us." "I just did my job." "No." His grip tightened. "You performed miracles by candlelight in a war zone. That's not a job, Alina. That's grace." She didn't have the energy to argue. Instead, she held his hand and watched the sun rise over an estate that looked like a battlefield, knowing that somewhere out there, Victor Dane was planning his next move. But for now, in this moment, they had survived. And that would have to be enough. Dawn light filtered through the shattered study windows, casting fractured patterns across broken glass and splintered wood. Alina stood at the empty frame where a sniper's bullet had changed everything, watching armed men patrol grounds scarred by violence. Behind her, Cassian stirred. She turned to find him sitting up slowly on the leather sofa where she'd insisted he rest after his fever finally broke at 4 a.m. His color was better, no longer the gray of death, but exhaustion carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth. "You should be sleeping," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of giving orders, demanding supplies, refusing to let wounded men slip away into the dark. "I've slept enough." He moved carefully, testing his body's limits. "How many?" "Your men? Luca will walk with a limp, but he'll walk. The others are stable. 2 dead. Jonas told me their names, but I can't." Her voice cracked. "I can't remember. I should remember." "You saved the ones you could. That's all anyone can do." Alina laughed bitterly. "And Victor Dane's men? How many of them died? How many bodies are being cleaned up right now so I don't have to see them?" Cassian's jaw tightened. 12. 12. She tasted the number, metallic and wrong. 12 men dead. Because of me. Because I was tracked here like a... Because Victor Dane is a monster who uses innocence as weapons. Cassian stood with effort, moving to stand beside her at the broken window. "This isn't your fault, Alina." "Then whose fault is it?" She turned on him, exhaustion sharpening into fury. You say Victor's evil, but you're the one who built an empire that requires body counts. You're the one who retaliated. His voice was flat, final. Yes. The moment Jonas confirmed the assault came from Dane's crew, I gave the order. Ice slid through her veins. What order? To burn 3 of his safe houses. To eliminate his supply chain in Red Hook. To send a message that touching you, even attempting it, means total war. He met her gaze without flinching. Before dawn, Victor Dane lost 20 men, 500,000 in product, and the protection of his political contacts. By noon, he'll have lost more. Alina's legs went weak. You started a war. Over me? I ended one. Cassian's eyes burned with cold fury. Victor wanted leverage, a hostage he could use to control me. Now he has ashes and corpses, and the certainty that if he comes near you again, I'll erase everything he's built. That's not protection. That's genocide. That's survival. He moved closer, dangerous despite his weakness. You think there's a moral way to fight men like Victor Dane? A clean way to keep you safe? There isn't. There's only overwhelming force or death. I chose force. You chose murder. I chose you. The words hung between them, raw and undeniable. Every man I killed, every building I burned, I did it knowing exactly what it cost. And I'd do it again, 1,000 times. Because the alternative is you in Victor's hands, and I will burn the world before I let that happen. Alina stared at him. This man who spoke of mass violence like simple arithmetic. She should be horrified, should demand he take her home immediately, should run as far from his darkness as possible. Instead, she heard herself ask, why? Why what? Why me? You said it yourself. I'm a variable, a complication. You could have let Victor take me, used it as an opportunity to draw him out. Why risk everything for someone you barely know? Cassian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because when you stitched my wound in that ER, your hands shook but your eyes didn't. Because you refused my money like it was poison. Because when I was dying from fever and infection, you performed surgery by candlelight in a war zone and wouldn't let me go. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, feather-light despite the calluses. Because somewhere in 12 years of blood and violence and becoming a monster, I forgot what mercy looked like. And then you walked into my life and showed me. Cassian. Her voice broke on his name. I don't deserve you, he continued. Don't deserve your compassion or your hands on my skin, or the way you look at me like I'm still human. But I'm selfish enough to want it anyway. To fight for it. To kill for it. Tears burned hot down her cheeks. You can't build a future on bodies. I don't want a future. His thumb brushed away her tears. I just want you alive. Safe. Breathing. Everything else is negotiable. She should push him away. Should remember her brother, the violence, the blood on her hands that wasn't only his. Instead, she leaned into his touch. I hate this, she whispered. Hate that saving you feels like saving myself. Hate that every time you nearly die, something in me breaks that I didn't know existed. Hate that I'm addicted to this. To you. Like it's the only thing keeping me alive. Alina. My whole life fell apart when James died. When Tomas died. I became smaller, quieter, safer, like if I just disappeared enough, tragedy couldn't find me. Her hands fisted in his shirt, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palms. But you see me, even covered in blood, even shaking with fear, even knowing I should run, you see me. And I don't know how to walk away from that. Then don't. His forehead touched hers, their breath mingling in the space between. Don't walk away. Don't disappear. Stay. Fight with me. Hate me if you need to. But stay. The kiss happened like inevitability, gravity pulling them together until there was no space left. Only heat and desperation, and something that felt dangerously like hope. His mouth was gentle, despite the violence he was capable of, tasting of fever and blood and promises neither should make. Her hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer, drowning in the contradiction of him. Killer and protector, monster and man. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you this," he said, voice rough. "No one will touch you again. No one will threaten you, use you, hurt you. Every man in my organization will know that harming you means death. Every enemy will understand that you're under my protection, absolute and permanent." That sounds like ownership. It's not ownership. It's choice. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "You can leave tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you want. I'll have Marco drive you home with enough security to keep you safe for the rest of your life. But while you're here, while you choose to be here, you're mine to protect. And I protect what's mine with everything I have." Alina studied his face, seeing past the scars and exhaustion to something deeper. This man who'd built an empire on vengeance, who'd retaliated with overwhelming force to keep her safe, who'd nearly died twice and kept fighting because surrender meant losing her. "I should go," she said. "Walk away before this destroys us both." "Yes, you should. But I won't. Not yet." She touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "Not until I understand what this is. What we are. We're two people who survived things we shouldn't have." He turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm, and found each other in the aftermath. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Men cleared debris. Repairs began. The machinery of Cassian's empire churned on, efficient and brutal. Inside, in a room full of broken glass and bullet holes, two people who shouldn't exist in the same world stood holding each other like lifelines. And somewhere in the distance, Victor Dane planned his next move, not knowing that the nurse he'd tried to use as bait had become the one thing more dangerous than any weapon, the thing worth dying for, the thing worth killing for, the thing that would burn his entire world to ash if he tried to touch her again. 24 hours after the siege, Cassian told her she could go home. "It's over," he said, standing in the study that still smelled of gunpowder and broken glass. His color had returned, the fever fully broken, though he moved with the careful precision of someone still healing. "Victor received my message. He's gone to ground. You're safe now." Alina should have felt relief. Instead, something cold settled in her chest. Just like that? Just like that. But his eyes told a different story. One written in bodies and burned buildings and a war that would never truly end. "Marco will drive you home. Security detail will remain in place for a few weeks, just as a precaution. And then? Then you go back to your life." He moved closer, his hand rising to cup her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he was. "Back to night shifts and that terrible apartment and your carefully controlled existence. I won't hold you here, Alina. I never could." She wanted to argue, to tell him that going back was impossible now that she'd seen this world, touched this man, understood what it meant to stand between life and death while empires warred around her. Instead, she just nodded. The drive back to Brooklyn felt surreal. Marco drove in silence, 2 additional SUVs flanking them, one ahead, one behind. The city passed by in a blur of morning light and ordinary lives continuing on, oblivious to the violence that had reshaped her world. "Miss Marek," Marco said as they neared her neighborhood, "there's something you should know." "What?" "Salvatore doesn't do things by half measures. When he says you're protected, he means—" The words died as they turned onto her street. Black SUVs lined both sides of the block. Not 3, not 5, at least a dozen, maybe more, parked with military precision. And standing between them, spaced at perfect intervals, were men in long coats, 50 of them, maybe more, silent, watchful. An army disguised as shadows. Alina's breath caught. What is this? Marco pulled to a stop in front of her building. Your protection. Permanent protection. This is insane. I can't. She stared at the men, recognizing some from the estate. Jonas stood nearest her building, arms crossed, his massive frame radiating controlled threat. This is my home, my neighborhood, you can't just… Mr. Vero's orders, Marco said quietly. You're to be protected at all times. No exceptions. She stumbled out of the vehicle, her legs unsteady. The morning air was cool against her face, carrying the smell of coffee and exhaust and the ordinary rhythms of city life. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Jonas stepped forward, his expression neutral. Miss Marek, we've secured the perimeter. 2 men will be stationed in the hallway outside your apartment. 4 more in the lobby. The rest rotate in shifts, 24-hour coverage. For how long? Permanently. No inflection in his voice, just fact. Those are the orders. Alina looked down the street. Curtains twitched in windows. Mrs. Chen from 3B peered out, eyes wide. The bodega owner stood in his doorway, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling the police. This is going to terrify my neighbors. They'll adjust. Jonas's tone suggested this wasn't negotiable. We're here to protect you, not interact with civilians. They'll forget we exist within a week. That's not how this works. That's not how normal people live. You're not normal people anymore, Miss Marek. Jonas's eyes held something like sympathy. Not after what you did. Not after what you mean to him. The weight of it pressed down on her. The impossibility of returning to ordinary life when 50 armed men stood guard over her existence. When every neighbor would wonder who she was, what she'd done, why she warranted this level of protection. When her hands still remembered the feel of Cassian's blood, his skin, his heartbeat beneath her palms. I need to go inside, she said, her voice thin. Jonas nodded. 2 men flanked her as she climbed the stairs to her building. The security door, broken since the 90s, had been replaced with reinforced steel and a biometric lock. Inside, the lobby had been transformed. New cameras, bulletproof glass, men stationed at positions that offered maximum tactical advantage. Her building, her home, now a fortress. The 4th-floor hallway was empty except for 2 men in suits stationed outside her door. They nodded respectfully as she approached, one of them unlocking her door with a key she'd never given anyone. We've done a full security sweep, he said. Reinforced the locks, installed cameras at entry points. If you need anything, press this. He handed her a small device, sleek, black, expensive. Direct line to Mr. Vero in Security Command. She took it numbly, stepping into her apartment. It looked exactly the same. The water-stained ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the medical school textbooks, her small, careful life preserved like an exhibit in a museum. But everything had changed. She moved to the window, looking down at the street below. The SUVs, the men in long coats. An army standing watch over a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that barely registered on the city's consciousness. Alina looked down at her hands, the same hands that had stitched Cassian's wound in that ER, that had performed surgery by candlelight, that had held his hand while fever consumed him, that had touched his face before kissing him like drowning. They looked the same, but they'd killed and saved and changed everything. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She opened it. A voice message. Cassian's voice, low and intimate in her ear. You saved my life, Alina. The night you stitched me up in that ER, you became something I couldn't let go. I know you think this is control, possession. Maybe it is, but it's also the only way I know how to keep you breathing in a world that wants to destroy anything good. A pause. The sound of him breathing, like he was right beside her. I've claimed your safety, your protection. I won't apologize for that. But your life, your choices, your freedom, those are still yours. The men outside aren't there to cage you. They're there so you can exist without fear, so you can sleep without wondering if Victor Dane will come for you in the dark. Another pause, longer this time. I don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect you to understand. But know this. You walked into my world covered in my blood and refused to let me die. That changed me in ways I'm still discovering, ways that terrify me, ways that make me want to be less of a monster. His voice dropped lower, rougher. You saved my life, Alina Marek. And whether you meant to or not, you claimed mine in return. This is what that looks like. This is what it means to matter to a man like me. The message ended. Alina stood at her window, phone clutched in her hand, watching an army stand guard over her ordinary life. She thought about mercy and violence and the impossible space between them. About a man who built empires on corpses but looked at her like she was salvation. About the moment she'd chosen to stitch his wound instead of calling the police. The first choice that had led to all of this. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The city woke up. Life continued on. But Alina Marek's carefully controlled existence was gone, burned away by ice-gray eyes and blood-stained hands and kisses that tasted like sin and survival. She'd saved the Mafia boss's life. And now 50 of his men surrounded her house, not as punishment, as promise. The war between salvation and sin had only just begun. And somewhere in the heart of it, Alina was beginning to realize she'd been fighting on the wrong side all along. She looked at her phone one more time, then typed a single message. "This isn't over, is it?" The response came immediately. "No, Solnishko, it's only just begun." Alina set the phone down, closed her curtains against the watchful eyes below, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped running from danger and started running toward it. The answer, she realized, was the moment she'd met Cassian Vero's eyes in that ER and decided that mercy mattered more than safety. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. Outside, 50 men stood guard. Inside, a woman who'd once been a surgeon looked at her hands and tried to remember when exactly she'd stopped saving lives and started changing them. In the darkness between choices, Alina Marek discovered something terrifying. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is show mercy to a monster, because monsters don't forget. They claim, they protect, they burn the world to keep you safe. And sometimes, in the ashes, you realize you were never saving him at all. You were saving yourself. Alina looked at her reflection in the darkened window, a woman who'd walked into an ER 3 nights ago and walked out into a war. She'd bandaged a Mafia boss's wounds with steady hands and a racing heart. She'd thought she was saving his life. She hadn't realized she was surrendering her own. Outside, 50 men stood watch in the dawn light, silent sentinels guarding the woman who'd shown their king mercy. Inside, Alina finally understood the truth. In Cassian Vero's world, there was no such thing as a simple act of kindness. There was only before she stitched his wound, and after he claimed her soul. She'd bandaged the Mafia boss. Now she belonged to him. And in the darkness between salvation and sin, she was beginning to realize she didn't want to escape. If this story left you breathless, if you're craving more dark romance, impossible choices, and dangerous men who'll burn the world for the women they claim, then don't let this be where we part ways. Hit that like button if Alina and Cassian's twisted connection has you hooked. Subscribe so you never miss the next chapter in their story. Because trust me, this war between mercy and obsession is far from over. Drop a comment below. Would you have stitched his wounds? Would you have walked away? Or would you, like Alina, have discovered that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can save is a monster's heart? More stories of forbidden desire, moral crossroads, and love that defies every rule are coming your way. Stay tuned. The next tale is darker, more twisted, more impossible to resist. Until then, remember, sometimes mercy is the most dangerous weapon of all. See you in the next story, if you dare.